Right, hello everyone. My name is Karina Urquhart. I'm the Executive Director at BIC and your host for this BIC Brunch today, which is all about making printed books accessible. Just some housekeeping before we get started. Those of you who have been on one of these webinars before will be very familiar with these, but so this is really for the benefit of those who haven't. Let me just share the screen, that would be helpful. There we go. So yes, so just some housekeeping. So the questions, we'll have a slot for questions right at the end of the session. So if you have any as we go through, please do feel free to just pop them into the question box. There's a question box on your, you should have a little toolkit somewhere on your screen. So it may have collapsed, but you might need to open it. And when you open it, there should be a question box. Feel free to put them in there at any time as we go through. The event's being recorded today so that we can use it in our marketing, so that we can post it to YouTube, that we can share it with people that haven't been able to come today, and be reassured that no attendees will be identified in the recording. I need to say this, so just please note that while accessible printed books will be explored today, it shouldn't be in any way considered legal advice by any individual or organisation attending the event today. And a gentle reminder as well that BIC is a neutral membership organisation, and as such we politely ask that all attendees and speakers avoid any conversations or questions that might be considered commercially sensitive or anti-competitive. So that's the necessary bits out the way. We will be sharing the slides later as well, so don't worry if you don't get an opportunity to scribble down any links that you might see. You will have those coming to you later on in the slides. And finally, if you are on Blue Sky, please feel free to share any comments or thoughts on there. Our address is on the screen. We're not on Twitter anymore, so if you are on Blue Sky, do come and find us. So this is the agenda for today. We've got 4 speakers for you. We should be finishing at about 1:30, hopefully on time. And our 4 speakers are Ailsa. I'll introduce them in a bit more detail as we go through, but we have Ailsa Bathgate from Barrington Stoke, Emma Steele from Every Cherry Publishing, Daniel Eggleston from the Ulverscroft Group, and Laura Dolan from UCAF and CPI. So you have a slot there for your questions and answer session. But don't wait till then. If you've got a question, please do just put it in as you think of it. So before we get started then, just a little bit about BIC. For those of you who don't know who we are, this won't take long, don't worry. So for the benefit of people who don't know who we are, BIC is a UK-based members organisation at the heart of the book industry. We create standards, best practices and resources that are freely available, and we help organisations become more efficient, save money, become less wasteful, and ultimately greener. We hold a unique position of trust, facilitating UK and international collaboration to reach agreement on dependable book industry standards and best practice in the supply chain. So if you want to find out more about what we do, please do go onto our website. There's a lot more information on there. I'm not going to go into the detail of everything that we do now. We don't have time, but do feel free to go and have a look. There's loads of resources and a lot more information about how to get involved, how to join, etc. Just very quickly wanted to show you our accessibility hub before we get going. It's free for everyone to access. Go and have a look. It covers a variety of things, including industry standards, training courses, validation tools, our webinar series with links out to all the other videos, and much more. So do take a look. It's an evolving hub. So if you do have anything that you want us to add that you think isn't on there, please do let me know and we can have a look about adding it. Okay, I think that's everything I need to cover off with regards to BIC. So let's talk a little bit about this accessibility series. So if you're not familiar with what we've been doing, since July last year, we've been working to put webinars together on a monthly basis covering different elements of accessibility, predominantly, if not wholly, up until now, looking at digital for obvious reasons, given the impact of the EAA. So you can see there on our YouTube channel, we have a number of, I think it's 8 recordings freely available for you to go and have a look. You can also find links to them on our Accessibility Hub. So yeah, so back to today's session. Today, our speakers are going to guide us through the accessibility considerations for printed books, as I've already said. Although not covered by the EAA, specifically, the accessibility of printed books cannot be ignored. And here at BIC, we consider it to be really incredibly important that this topic is also featured as part of this accessibility series. So during the event today, we're going to hear from our experts about how to create printed books that meet the needs of all readers, including those with dyslexia, visual impairments, and special educational needs. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Elsa. Elsa Bathgate is a publisher at Barrington Stoke, an imprint of HarperCollins Publishers, and Elsa is going to talk to us today about who their readers are, different types of readers, their authors, their teachers and illustrators, and all the steps that they have already been taking and continue to take to remove reading barriers, including editorial considerations, fonts, contrast, design considerations, and much, much more. So over to you, Elsa.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. As Karina explained, I'm the publisher at Barrington Stoke, and I'm joining you today from a beautifully sunny Edinburgh, not always the case. But that's where the Barrington Stoke offices are based, and we were founded 27 years ago now by a woman called Patience Thompson, who was the retiring principal of a school for children with dyslexia in London, and her publisher daughter-in-law, Lucy Jukes, who was the sales director at Bloomsbury at the time. And they both knew that there was a great need for top quality yet accessible books for young people, but also realised that the publishing industry really wasn't catering for them at that time. And what was unique about the way they started the company was that they reached out immediately to big name authors and who they wanted to help us, and also to publish the books in an appealing way, but one that reduces the barriers to reading. You know, there's a lot of gloomy news around in the moment about children's reading. You were told that their attention spans are much shorter and that they just aren't reading for pleasure, with the allure of screens being ever more difficult to compete with. But we know that our books can help with this. Over the years, our list has grown to over 400 titles, and that is across a range of series from children from 5 up to 16 plus. But our core mission remains exactly the same as it started. We want to enable every child to develop as a reader and to develop a love of reading for pleasure. And we know, you know, from numerous pieces of research that this is hugely important in terms of development, positive mental health, and successful life outcomes. So Patience's lifetime experience as an educator, a writer, and also a parent of a son with severe dyslexia gave her an expert understanding of who she wanted Barrington Stoke to publish for. And all of the interventions that I'm going to talk about today were really rigorously tested with these readers. You know, there's a great deal of information around at the moment about dyslexia, with the high-profile campaign fronted by Jamie Oliver, which is urging the government to make testing for dyslexia mandatory and also to raise awareness in education. You know, it's believed that 1 in 10 of the population are dyslexic, which is a huge, huge proportion. And these readers have always been at the forefront of what Barrington Stoke's trying to achieve. But there are also other issues that can cause difficulty with reading, such as visual stress, those with sight or hearing problems that may have affected development in some way. There are those that don't have English as a first language. And there are also those children who might have missed a crucial period of education, you know, a point where reading acquisition was the focus. So then there are also a wider group of young people who are just not interested in reading for pleasure. You know, we call them reluctant readers, and they can be book averse for a myriad of reasons, such as low confidence, they can be easily distracted, they might not be able to find a book that interests them, or maybe they don't see themselves or their lives reflected in the books that are on offer to them. And, you know, experience has taught us that no two children are the same. You know, those children who we call them roughly the can't reads and the won't reads. The can't reads are not necessarily book averse, and the won't reads are not necessarily poor readers. But it can often be the case that reluctant readers can be masking some kind of difficulty. And also, you know, we shouldn't forget the really keen and able readers. You know, some kids just want a really quick, satisfying read, perhaps by one of their favourite authors, and they are also very, very much part of the Barrington-Stoke family. So, with Barrington-Stoke books, it all starts with the power of the story, and this is at the heart of everything that we do. You know, our books are shorter so that they're an achievable challenge for our readers, but this means that they have an awful lot of work to do in a really restricted word count. You know, they need to grip and entertain right from the very first page. And it takes real skill to craft a short novel that delivers in terms of plot and character, world building and themes. And so that is why we've always aimed to work with the very best writers in the UK. You know, authors like Michael Morpurgo, Michael Rosen, Julia Donaldson, Owen Colfer, Mallory Brackman, Piers Torday, Pamela Butchart, Joseph Coelho, Vashti Hardy, you know, to name just a few. And why we work with these authors is to ensure that our readers are never shortchanged. And it's also really, really important. You know, I'm constantly reading and looking at what's in the market, because one of our main aim is to make sure that our readers can access work from the same authors that their peers are reading and talking about. You know, their friend might be reading an Emma Carroll book, they can be reading our Emma Carroll book, and there's no sense of stigma, and they can be involved in the conversation and in the world of reading. And many of our authors are also, the next slide, sorry, they have been or are teachers, and they've often used our books in the classroom, and they know exactly what these readers need and are looking for. And we're really, really proud of the books that we publish. And the standard of excellence that we pursue was recognised when Lark by Anthony McGowan won the Carnegie Medal. It was a huge moment for us. It's the most prestigious, you know, the oldest and most prestigious award for children's writing in the UK. And we've also won and been shortlisted for a plethora of other awards that you can see here. So, when I've convinced one of these brilliant authors to write for us, you might be surprised to hear that I then say to them, please don't write with a struggling or dyslexic reader in mind, because I've approached them because I really want to capture their unique voice. That's why I've gone to them in the first place. And the only restriction I really place on them in the first instance is length. Because if you consider that the average middle grade, you know, for 8 to 12-year-old readers, the average length is about 40,000 words, and some of them are much, much longer than that. Our books for that same age range are between 7,500 and 10,000 words, so they are much shorter. So once they've delivered that shorter book, it then goes through the same standard structural edit that it would go through with any publisher, but there are some things I'm really trying to ensure at this stage. And as I said earlier, the story really needs to capture the reader's attention from the first page. And the chapters have to be kept to a manageable length, you know, to keep the pace moving. And we often have cliffhangers at the end of the chapter for children who are maybe reading a chapter at a time with someone, you know, a teaching assistant, that, you know, you want them to be waiting and desperate to find out what happens next. One thing that often comes up is where most editors will tell their authors to kind of show rather than tell. Our readers often need a bit more telling, a bit more dialogue to help them understand what's going on at each step of the story. And it's really, really important that the story is age appropriate to the reader, and never patronising or talking down to them. So once they've been through that kind of more standard edit, what then makes us stand apart is the next stage in the process, which we call our language edit or accessibility edit. And these are done by specialists, and they go through the text word by word and line by line. And they're really looking out for kind of potential potholes that might trip up a struggling reader. And I could honestly do an hour on this part of the process alone. I find it absolutely fascinating, as do our authors. And when I joined the company, I imagined there would be a really complicated kind of style guide and rule book, but it's actually a much more sophisticated process than that. It's much more nuanced, and it treats each book individually. And the level of expertise that goes in at this stage has taken years and years to build up since the company was started. But to give you a couple of examples, the vocabulary can be challenging as long as it's familiar and really important to the story. We avoid using too many abstract words, like particularly, usually, because these can trip readers up and slow down the reading process. And it's also interesting, but the edit when it comes in is always much heavier at the start of the book because you're trying to ease the reader in. You want to get them hooked on that story so that they want to find out what happens, which means that they will build confidence as it goes along, and they'll be far more willing to pursue, push forward with challenges that occur later in the book. So that's the editorial side of things, but design plays a really crucial role in the Barrington-Stoke approach. And again, it's a process that's been developed over the years to make our books as physically as accessible as possible. We have our own unique font, and it was designed by dyslexia and eyesight specialists to be extra readable. And if you see it there, each letter has kind of added shape, which helps it to stick when children are trying to decode words. And it also means that there's no ambiguity, because if you look at the B and the D, or the P and the Q, you'll see that they're not just mirrored or flipped, which is what happens in a lot of fonts, but they actually have their own shape, which means that there's less chance of them getting muddled up. The letters have a serif, which gives them more shape and helps words hang together, especially if they're spaced further apart. And then we take great care over the layout of our text. The books, for the next slide, you can see the words are given a lot of space on the page to stop it from feeling overcrowded and to ensure that letters don't interfere with each other visually. And it's also important when fonts are larger that they're not so large that they look off-puttingly babyish to our readers, and which would also mean they'd have to work hard moving from line to line just to get to the end of a sentence, which impedes the comprehension and the method of chunking to put words together to make sense. And it's also an issue if you have eye tracking problems with eye tracking. So we don't also write justifier text. There's an example in the next slide which just shows how difficult it alters the spacing between words, and the paragraphs don't have any shape, which makes it harder to read and really easy to lose your place. And one of the things we're possibly best known for is tinted paper, which varies from a just off-white to a darker creamy yellow. And this is really important because it reduces the glare that occurs when black letters are printed on white paper. And our paper is also thicker. Not that only feels good and looks good, but it actually stops distracting show through from the next page, which can be really off-putting. And it also helps to bulk out a shorter novel to make sure that it has a spine and feels like a real book. And the level of creaminess of the paper varies according to the reading age of the text. So the larger the gap between actual age and reading age, the stronger the tint. And you can see here, the one in the middle is our kind of reading age 8 middle grade text, and the one on the right is a teen book, but it's aimed at readers of a reading age of 6. So then we also use a lot of illustration in our texts. This is commonplace, but it was pretty unheard of outside picture books when the company was set up. And illustration can really help with comprehension. It breaks up the text and can help children to read their place. For example, here we're showing what it means when the text says their jaws drop to the floor. Pictures also help visualization. So at the beginning of a story, they can help struggling readers to picture the scene in their minds and also act as introductions to the characters. And we take care to space out the pictures throughout the text so that the book feels less daunting. And they also help to hold readers' attention as they move through the text. I've just got a couple of examples here to show what might be difficult. On the left, you can see that the text flows around the illustration, but ends up meaning that there are one-word lines, which I explained can be really difficult for eye tracking and also for chunking for sense. And on the left, we also avoid using bold and different fonts and large swathes of italic in the book, because that can be really difficult for struggling readers. There's also been an explosion in graphic novels, which I think is fantastic. Any route to reading should be celebrated. But if you think for struggling readers, there are real challenges here in terms of what are the rules? Where do you start reading? Where does the text flow? Do you read from left to right? And also the use of capitals and the bubbles can be really difficult for our readers. There's a brief overview here that if you're interested in reading more, it's in our catalogue, but it just shows, sorry, the different ranges that we offer, from our little gems for first chapter books for 5 to 7 year olds, all the way up to teen books, and they go through reading ages 6 through to 9. And we also then have Next Step Fiction, which is printed on standard paper but still in our font, and they're still much shorter at about 25,000 words. We work really hard on our covers, so I love this part of the process, but we really want to make them look just as good as anything else out there. We want them to sit proudly on the tables, on the shelves. So again, it's reducing any sense of stigma. These just look like any other book that your friends are reading. And we've tried different ways over the years to highlight what we do. And we used to at one point use stickers that said dyslexia friendly or super readable. But the strong feedback that we got was that the readers don't want the books to be identified as being different in any way. So now we just signpost it discreetly at the side of the barcode, which has the reading age and the interest age there. So metadata is not my area, I have to say straight away, but I've just given a snapshot here of some of the codes that we use, the thema codes, and the most important one there is the 5AR, which is showing that the content's been adapted or suitable for reluctant readers. Sorry. We are now also producing audio versions of our books, not across the whole range. We've started with our Reading Age 8 and Reading Age 9 titles, and we publish these simultaneously with the books. And we've also produced resources for librarians and teachers to support these, if you click through there. And the next one as well, there's just we've got lots of resources on our website with information. So to sum up then, we talk about our books being dyslexia friendly, and the next slide here, I've talked about these points about the interventions that we make, but the main point is really the quality, to go back to that, the quality of the authors we work with and the amazing stories that they deliver to us, because readers, kids who are not keen on reading or find it difficult, they deserve the absolute best stories to make sure that all the effort they put in comes with a great reward. And I'm just going to end here with a quote on the next slide from one of our readers. I honestly think it's one of the most rewarding jobs in publishing. We get so much feedback from teachers, from librarians, from parents, but also from readers themselves, talking about how our books have changed their lives. And it's incredibly moving. So thank you so much. That's what Brunch does.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Elsa. Yeah, so just some observations from me very quickly before we go to the next speaker. I think what's really coming across, and I'm sure we'll hear it in the other presentations as well, is the importance of simultaneous access to a publication, that the readers, they don't want to feel, they want to feel included. They want to be able to share things and explore authors and stories, etc., with their friends, and also the removing the sense of stigma with regards to how you label your books, which is interesting. And again, I'm sure we'll come on to it, the importance of balancing that with the importance of discoverability, yeah, and the metadata and everything else. So yeah, so brilliant. Thank you so much. I do have some questions, but I will put them in the question box. Well, I won't, obviously, but I will save them for later on. So we'll see what other attendees, because they may be asking similar questions. So thank you very much. So I'm now going to invite our next speaker today, which is Emma Steele. So I'm just, if you can bear with me, I'm just going to hand over the control of slides to Emma. It's worked in the rehearsals, so let's hope it works now. Talk amongst yourselves for a while. So yeah, so Emma Steele is head of Every Cherry Imprint, Every Cherry Publishing, and Emma's going to talk to us today about SEND, or special educational needs and disabilities, different accessible book types, different accessible features, including, but as we'll see, not limited to, symbol reading, audio and soundscapes, and how they signpost their titles, and much, much more. So over to you, Emma. I'm seeing your slides in note or a presenter mode at the moment. I don't know if you want to make them bigger. That's it, perfect. Great, I'll hand over to you now then. Thank you.
Oh, hello. Sorry, I was just on mute then, but now I am here. So let me just work out where I am. So welcome to Every Cherry. Thank you for the introduction, and it was really nice hearing from Elsa, because I think we work in a very similar field. So a little bit about what we're going to cover today. Firstly, the question of what special educational needs is. So I will go through what it is and why it's so important that we think about our audience and our readers and make sure that the needs of our readers are being met. We'll look at what symbol reading is and how it can help readers with special educational needs. We'll also look at sensory storytelling, and how Every Cherry approach this, as it's a challenge really for publishers to try and make sure that sensory storytelling is done in the best way within the limitations of printed books. Again, we'll talk about the findability of the Every Cherry range versus making sure it's subtle enough so that a reader doesn't feel like you know, they are reading at a lower level or anything like that, and also looking at our production guidelines, and then we'll look at metadata as well. So a little bit about me to start with. I haven't got a long career in publishing. I actually started out as a teacher, and I worked in special educational needs for about 17 years as a class teacher, as a Senko, as a manager. I was head of English. So I did a lot of work in the special needs community and teaching arena. And it wasn't until about 2.5 years ago that I made the leap into publishing. And that mainly stemmed from the need of accessible reading material for people with learning disabilities, especially since the curriculum encourages any learner of any ability to read certain texts, such as the classics. So I've tried really hard to make sure that everyone can access the books that they need to access. And there is a little flash here just to talk about what SEN is. I will go into this in a little bit more depth, but in a nutshell, it's about encompassing all diagnosed disabilities, ranging from physical to neurodiversity and sensory challenges. It really is a huge umbrella term, but if I do say the word SEND, I am referring to people with disabilities. So the first place I wanted to start was to look at this image on screen. I want to ask you all, what do you see when you look at this image? It can be that some people see different women, but it might help you if I give you the title of the picture. So it's titled My Wife and Mother-in-Law. So some people see a young woman and some people see an older lady too. And the reason I've shown this is that we all see the world in a different way, whether we are neurodivergent, whether we have a disability or whether we don't. But what we need to do is try and understand that even if we do see the world in a different way, we need the right way to access the world in the best way possible, despite how we see things. So SEN affects the way a person learns new things throughout their life. It's different for anyone, and no people are the same, as it's the same with any human being. So a person with a learning disability might have difficulty understanding complicated information, which is really key when we think about the publishing world and books, because often books do hold complicated information, and it's about how we communicate that in an accessible way. Again, learning some skills can be very difficult. That can range from independence through to fine motor skills like cooking and chopping things. And it also might be learning how to read. And then again, a disability can also be how somebody looks after themselves or their independence of living alone. This is a very small nutshell of what a special educational need and disability is. And it's taken from the MENCAP website, which is one of the biggest disability charities in the UK. However, there are lots and lots more to cover in this, and I could talk to you about this for hours, but this is the easiest way to give you a foundation knowledge. And basically, everyone sees the world in a different way, and it's how we can reach everybody and make sure that they can develop a love of reading, no matter how they see the world. So statistics then, this is to widen views of disability and how many people are affected with special educational needs. There's over 1.6 million students across the UK that have a diagnosed special educational need. 13.6% of these don't have what we call an education and healthcare plan. So what that means is that there are many people with a diagnosed disability, but these education and healthcare plans outline how best to support those young people, whether that be in education or further along in life. So what we really need to think about is 13.6% of young people haven't got the support they need to access learning or reading. There's a huge wait time for diagnosis, whether it be neurodivergent or for paediatrics. We're looking at between, 40 weeks plus. Now, if we think about that in terms of a school year is 36 weeks. So really, on average, in my experience as a SENCO, a diagnosis would usually take between 3 to 7 years, depending where you are in the UK. So that time is a huge chunk of education, and that's where we can come in to help young people be able to access reading in a way that best suits them whilst they're waiting, and then once they've received their diagnosis. And this is a really interesting statistic, which I thought was really key for this talk, and that is that only 38% of children with special needs achieve the expected reading skills by the end of primary school, compared to 83% of their non-SEN peers. So if we think about that, that is a huge chunk of people who really do need additional support to help with learning to read and help to access books. And that's where places like Barrington-Stoke and Every Cherry can come in and really help people to be able to access the world of reading that we all love and enjoy. So as I entered the publishing world, publishers and many people use really great accessible reading tools, such as dyslexia-friendly font, braille, audiobooks, pastel paper or off-white paper, bigger font. There's so many ways to really enhance readability, but these are all reading tools. What really Every Cherry have tried to do is to incorporate what we've called a total reading experience, so that it's not just the tools that are being used, but it's also the approaches to reading as well, and to widen that view of what is reading, and to understand that reading can be in so many different formats. So if we think about how humanity have told stories, we can start off in the Stone Age with cave walls and how reading has been, we've communicated culture, history, anything that's important to a specific community through image, and that started really, really early on into humanity, and through the years has developed, such as the Greeks drawing pictures on pottery to communicate key parts of stories and Greek mythology. We've got Egyptian hieroglyphics, again, communicating through image and becoming a pattern of images which form understanding and potentially words, really. And then we have stained glass windows, whereby a lot of the congregation may not have been able to read Latin, but that stained glass window would really give a window into, forgive that pun there, I actually didn't mean to do that, but give a window into what was being told in that story. And if we think about it, we still use images and pictures today to communicate. So looking at all of the icons on screen, I'm sure you will all recognise them and be able to say what they mean. However, I'm wondering whether some of you listening or watching understand what this sign is. Some of you may be able to, because it's written in Arabic. Some of you may be able to read Arabic, but I don't understand it. So if I look at this sign, I have absolutely no idea what it means. However, if I partner it with an image, such as the fire escape sign that we're all familiar with, I now understand and know what that means, because if I pair them together, that image connotes meaning. So the sign means fire exit, and here is the visual to represent it. So the next thing I looked at when I started in publishing is what is reading? How have we evolved into understanding what reading is? And what I found on the Oxford Learner's Dictionary definition was it's to look at and understand the meaning of written or printed words or symbols. So it's about written or printed words or symbols. So it's widening our view of what reading actually is. So I created Every Cherry. I had the imprint, but with a huge team of authors, illustrators, editors, and designers. And we've come up with a range of books that really try to pull in lots of different ways to access reading. So we have here what Every Cherry is all about, but essentially it's breaking down barriers to reading in an affordable and an accessible way. So similar to Barrington Stoke, we do have our easier range, which again covers a lot of what Elsa was saying about font, about how many words are on the page, all of those kind of things. So we do have a range similar to Barrington Stoke, but different in some ways, which I'll go through in a second. But the range I want to focus on today mainly is our symbolised range. And what I'm terming as a symbol is a small icon above a word that represents its meaning, as you can see here. So here you can see that every keyword is represented by an image, and those images give clues as to what a word says. Now, this might look alien to us, but in the SEN world, symbols are used every single day as part of communication, to label cupboards, to label drawers, to talk about a timetable of the day. Some people use communication aids, which some of you may have seen, which are electronic devices which a young person can press on a symbol and it will speak for them. Reading in symbols was quite difficult for teachers to do because they would have to use programs to use these symbols and create books which were adapted for symbol reading. Every Cherry has now done that for them. So I'll go into this in a little bit more depth, but one of the key things that's been really important for Every Cherry is that the pages match in content of the easier and the symbolised range. So if a young person was to turn to page 10, one was a reader, one was a symbol reader, they would be able to turn to page 10 and everyone could access the story and the content of the story at the same time, but without feeling like they are, reading at a different level. The covers are very similar, the format's very similar, it's just written in a different way, and that's the key here with Every Cherry. It's that the content matches, but the format is different. So, like I said before, what are symbols? So they're visual clues that represent key words. Our symbols are designed in-house with speech and language therapists and specifically trained staff. We have a wide range of schools that we work with to ensure that the symbols are easy to understand and do what we want them to do. And we also try to build vocabulary within our books and have started to create a range whereby we follow the symbol reading rules so that people can start to read through symbols in printed books. So here's an example of how symbols would work. So can anyone guess what this symbol is? I think most of you will be able to guess. And if I go through these symbols, you can slowly see what they might mean. So a symbol can represent a word or a collection of words to make meaning easier. So we have quite a few here. But if we move that into a sentence, I wonder if you can guess what this means. So here we go. I ran to the bakery. Somebody very, very keen on visiting bakeries. We also include many accessible features. So each book has lots of different ways to build in to that total reading experience, and I like to call them safety nets. So for readers, it can be so tiring, like Elsa said, opening a book, you need to grasp that reader straight away. You need high quality books and high quality stories to make sure that that reader can really, really stay in that book and not be distracted. So we use lots of different things like dyslexia friendly font. We use glossaries on the same page rather than having to flick to the back of a book to find a word and its meaning. We also use audio glossaries. So at the front of every book, there's a free QR code so that a young person can click on a tricky word and hear the word and its meaning. Sometimes young people may not be able to decode a word, but if they can hear it and hear its definition, it can make it easier. Also, we provide free signed videos of the story. So again, it enables that read, listen, watch approach, whereby if a young person is struggling to read, struggling to listen, they can then watch the story too. We have a wide range of books in our selection, and from the classics to reading for pleasure to picture books. We try and incorporate a wide range of reading material, bearing in mind we only started publishing in 2024. So we started publishing in May 2024. Again, this is a range I'm really excited about. It's learning symbols, so it's teaching young people how to read through symbols on a need basis rather than a phonics basis. But phonics and this can work hand in hand too. So it can rely on need, but also phonetic decoding. The final range that we do is our Stories for Your Senses range, which I mentioned earlier about sensory storytelling. And what we do in this range is we encourage the carer, the reader, the parent, whoever it may be, to collect tangible real life items to use whilst reading the story. It also comes with a free audiobook and soundscape in the form of a QR code, as you can see. But essentially what we want people to do is, as they explore a spread, the young person who is accessing the book can touch and feel real life items. So for people with profound and multiple learning disabilities or preschool readers, they can really, really experience that sensory approach to reading and may have not been able to do that. So people with profound and multiple learning disabilities may not be able to really benefit from the touch and feel element of books. However, touching a real item can really, really help them to access. So quickly, I know that I'm running out of time. Again, similar to what Barrington Stoke have mentioned, signposting is key, but when we did a lot of our research, we spoke to parents, we spoke to young people with learning disabilities and without learning disabilities. The one thing that was really, really apparent is people didn't want this is for people who are struggling readers or for special needs. They wanted it to be subtle and that the cover of the story to be the same as everybody else's. So what we did was we've used different signposting linked to our branding. So we've used these little bubbles here to say what this includes. So what reading experience will this person get? So they could get symbolized, they could get audio. Illustrations are always throughout all of our books anyway, but this back section of the book really helps to signpost our readers to exactly what they'll be getting. Again, similar to what Elsa was saying, we use cream, wood-free paper, a higher GSM so that the show through is a lot less, and we also use embossing on the covers. So this element of the Every Cherry logo is embossed, which gives an added sensory fidget feature to all of our books. And then for our Stories for Your Senses range, they are board books encased, but again, they have that signposting of what you may need to read the story with. Again, we try and make it easy. So, you know, at the time of year of Christmas, we don't want people to be going and spending lots of money. Hopefully these items can be found for free or can be found around the house, or maybe pay £1 at the pound shop or wherever that may be. So metadata wise, I'll go through this really quickly. There were lots of challenges, like how to categorize books by age, because some readers have potentially have a lower cognitive age. So we try to link to reading interest age, but keep metadata linked for the age it's intended for, because it's difficult to try and categorize within the publishing world, and metadata as well. We have to be thorough but not give too much information, because obviously metadata. So what we try to do is list titles. It's how we list the titles, and we list by accessible feature and then the blurb. So we make sure we pull people in with what they need from the book rather than it's the story behind it. And then we need to be as specific as possible. So we need to use accurate classifications and make sure that we can get the books into the right people's hands. We also want to make sure that the terminology is clear so that parents and educators can find the right products. So we've had a big impact at Every Cherry, trying to get people into reading that otherwise may have not been able to access texts. Here there is a brilliant video of the Cheatham sisters using our symbolised text, and Hannah in particular being absolutely thrilled with seeing symbols in a book for the first time. Unfortunately, the sound won't play at the moment, but it will be available after. And then, yeah, we are trying very hard to get the word out there about Every Cherry so that people can enjoy reading and really embrace what reading can be for many people. And I'm going to finish there because I don't want to go over too far. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Emma. Sorry for the time check nudges there.
That's okay.
I think we need a separate session for each of the speakers. I think each of you could probably talk for the full length. It's such a fascinating subject, and like I said earlier, really important. So yeah, I just made some notes. Statistics: 1.6 million students in the UK with special educational needs. I think that's worth repeating. So I have, and quite frightening stats that only 38% of that 1.6 million achieve their expected reading skills by the end of primary school. Yeah, so you know that the more work that the book industry can do here to help, I think is really key. Also, again, what we've heard from Elsa and now from you is the subtlety of signposting, but with the balance of discoverability, both in store and online. And I'm sure we could explore that a bit more. I just want to see if maybe if that comes up in the Q&A, we can maybe give some extra time to that perhaps. But thank you. And the total reading experience as well, I think is just really interesting, the way that your organisation is approaching this whole subject. So and the importance of supporting materials. It's not just about the text in some cases. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you if you wouldn't mind handing over the control to Daniel while I introduce him. Next up, I'm delighted to welcome Daniel Eggleston, who is the Creative Services Lead at the Ulverscroft Group. And today, amongst many other things, Daniel's going to give us an introduction to large print, including what that term means, why it's so important. We'll also learn how Ulverscroft select their titles for large print, and how both their trading partners but also their readers, so their end users, can identify those books and easily find them. So over to you, Dan.
Thank you. My name is Daniel Eggleston, and I'll be talking to you about large print, mainly Ulverscroft's own published titles. I should just say I'm having a bit connection issues, so if I drop out or go really slow, I'll try and rectify it. But if anyone needs me to repeat anything, just let me know, and I will. Okay. So first, I'd like to give a bit of background on who Ulverscroft are. So we were founded in 1964 when our founder Fred Forbes was contacted by his neighbourhood health visitor, who made him aware of an ongoing issue with the area's elderly contingent, which was declining eyesight, which meant reading books had become increasingly difficult. As Fred had a background in both publishing and working with libraries, he sought to find a solution to this problem. And so his plan was to start a new publishing venture, Ulverscroft Large Print Books. And in September 1964, he published the first 4 large print books, which included Agatha Christie's A Pocketful of Rye. As you'll see from the slide, that edition looked a lot different to how our books look now. Now, fast forwarding to 2025, we currently have scheduled for the year collectively over 1,200 books, and these are either published directly by Ulverscroft or published by someone else, and we distribute them to our market. We primarily sell our editions to libraries around the world, and we internally manage all elements of the publication and distribution process. For our own published titles, we saw everything from the securing rights and typesetting, working with printers, to servicing the printed book and then sending them out to the customers. For our distributed titles, we will mainly work on the selling into libraries, the servicing and the distribution. And finally, all profits from the sale of Ulverscroft books go to fund the charitable work of the Ulverscroft Foundation, who give financial help to organisations which help visually impaired people around the world. Now I've given you a bit of background. I thought I'd best explain what a large print book actually is. So it's a specially formatted edition of a book designed to make reading more comfortable, especially for those with low vision, which is basically something that can't be corrected with glasses, contact lenses or surgery, as well as being easy for those with other visual impairments. I'll go into this a bit later, and perhaps Laura will cover it as well. But large print publishers all do things slightly differently, but they'll normally have these characteristics. A larger font size. Typically, a standard print edition would use a 10 or a 12-point font size, and large print is usually between 16 and 18. Ulverscroft's is 16. And the books will have a wider margin and increased line spacing, with the fonts being clearer to maximise reading capability. Now you've got a bit of background on what a large print book is. I wanted to explain why it's important. And some of this can be used to explain why accessible formats of any kind are important. It's incredibly difficult to make anything 100% accessible, but large print and today's other formats help to reduce literary inequality. Now, statistics I've included on the slide are from the RNIB. More than 2 million people are living with sight loss in the UK, and this is predicted to double by 2050. Every day, 250 people will start to lose their sight in the UK, and 1 in 5 people will live with some form of sight loss in their lifetime. And without large print and today's other formats, that means millions of readers are excluded from the joy and freedom that reading brings. And as I said, not all large print editions look the same, with publishers making different decisions based on their own customer feedback. The following is what's included in our Ulverscroft printed editions. So these are the titles that we have published, that we publish ourselves and don't distribute. So we use an eggshell coloured paper that has a matte finish to reduce glare and eye strain. The paper is also slightly thicker to prevent bleed through on the pages. And we also design our books to look as close to the standard print edition as much as possible. So we don't have a sticker on the front of our books saying it's large print. Instead, we have it on the spine. This is because we had feedback from some readers, and this is something that we've heard the previous speakers, that for whatever reason, they didn't want to promote the fact they were reading a large print book. And on the spine, it's big enough for people to recognise if they know what to look for, yet discreet enough to not cause any undue discomfort. And this placement also makes it easier to locate on a bookshelf and in libraries. Right. So again, just to specify this related to our own published titles, and it's not our distributed products. From our published titles, we are a secondary rights publisher. So we will purchase large print rights from the standard print publisher or the author's agent. And our publishing team will select to publish a book based on a few different reasons. So it could be feedback from our customers and readers, as well as looking at borrowing trends in libraries. Then it'll be whether can it be easily converted into a large print book. So it's not heavily dependent on inserts such as detailed diagrams or maps with small notes. And another consideration is the length of the book. Although we don't have a set rule on the length of the book, and it is possible to publish longer titles, customers can react negatively to titles that are considered too big. Libraries themselves can struggle to store them due to the width taking up valuable space on a shelf, and borrowers, especially those that may be elderly or have joint issues, can struggle to hold the book themselves due to the weight. So we do try to treat this subject on a case-by-case basis. But the most important thing is whether the book is a good read or not. Our team will check for each book to ensure its quality and suitability for our audiences and for our imprints. We want to ensure that readers have access to the best stories and feel included in every publishing moment. And so we also endeavour to publish our editions as close to the standard print publication as possible, so no one feels left out, everyone feels included. And then, so how to identify a large print book. So when looking for large print books, there's a couple of ways you can do this, either physically or digitally. As mentioned previously, we include large print on the spine of our books to make them more easily identifiable when on a bookshelf. And libraries normally will have a designated large print section, so the titles are easier to find for those that require them. In our metadata to external retailers, we include the large type large print edition tag. It's also included in our catalogue records for libraries, and we also include the height and width of the book. We are currently in the process of upgrading our internal systems, which includes looking at our existing metadata practices and looking at ways in which we can enrich the data so that we are ensuring a greater promotion of our accessible formats. So this is what we're doing now, but hopefully when we speak to you in the future, we could be doing even more. So finally, Ulverscroft are proud to be one of the leaders in large print publishing, and we're always looking at ways in which we can work to grow the format and reach as many people as possible. If you'd like to know more about Ulverscroft and our large print publishing, please don't hesitate to get in touch. We can direct you to the right person for your query. And thank you for listening.
Great, thank you, Daniel. Yeah, similar messages coming through, aren't they, about the subtlety of signposting, particularly. And what I thought was interesting, well, all of your presentation obviously was interesting, but the one thing that caught my ear was the consideration you give to the weight of the book, because it is a large print title. I thought that was really interesting that you're considering how heavy the book is for, and you know how achievable it would be for someone to be able to hold the book. So could you? I'm going to ask you to talk about that in the Q&A. Actually, I'm just looking at the clock. Yes, I will talk. I'll ask you that question when we come to the Q&A session, if that's okay. About sort of how you go about that. What do you work to a minimum weight, that type of thing, or a maximum weight? Sorry. So yeah. So thank you very much, and I'm going to ask you, if I may, to hand over to Laura while I introduce Laura. We've heard from publishers now And we're now going to hear from the printer's perspective. So without further ado, I'm going to invite our final speaker, Laura Dolan, board member at UCAF, UKAAF, hope I'm pronouncing that properly, and account director at CPI UK, to the virtual stage. Laura's going to take us through things from the printer's perspective, providing us with hints and tips about what to think about when it comes to print considerations, including different formats, paper stocks and colours, some of which we've already heard, but this will be from the printer's side of things, and other things to think about when instructing your printer to print accessible books. We'll also have a top level look at metadata considerations as well, and the importance of accessible format publication timings too, and more. So over to you, Laura. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, thank you. Hi everyone. I feel like I've got a big kind of footing to fill after all those amazing speakers that we've just seen. My name's Laura. I work for CPI, one of the biggest European and UK book printers, and I'm also a board member for UCAF. Those of you that aren't familiar with UCAF, it's the UK's Accessible Formats Association, and we support all kinds of businesses. It's not just funneled to publishing, so it's making sure name badges are accessible and readable, and all sorts of collateral. So I'm going to be speaking to you today about printing accessible formats. One thing that I will pre-limit with is there isn't a one-size-fits-all. So whether it's dyslexia friendly, whether it's large print, whether it's easy reads, whether it's SEN, whatever it might be. So just do your best, and by doing your best, you're going to reach readers that are going to be really appreciative of that. Okay, so some print considerations, and this is very general, just because we've heard about a lot of formats already today, and there are other accessible formats that we haven't spoken about, such as easy reads and braille. So again, very general. So the manufacturing process is exactly the same. So when you have a dyslexia friendly book or a large print book, the actual process on the print floor is no different to any other book, and the way that a printer would receive your files isn't any different either. In some formats, if you've got a standard text edition already, and you're also publishing an accessible format, in some cases the page count will increase, and that can vary even up to double the size of your standard textbook. So I always recommend, just in general, looking to go up a trim size. Also be mindful as well, no one wants to be on the beach with their Colleen Hoover that's the size of an A4 or an encyclopedia, but by going up a trim size, you're reducing the page count, which subsequently reduces your print cost, and then you can offer a better retail price to your customer. I think for all formats, all accessible formats, aim for minimal bleed through. It makes it difficult for any reader if you can see the words from the other side of the page showing through, or the images, whatever it might be. So ask your printer for paper samples, you know, so that you can have a look at different shades, different bleed throughs. Perhaps print, when you've got your book ready, print on a couple of different papers so you can see what that's like. Have a look at it under different lightings as well. A bit like when you paint your house, you know, you shove that cream paint on the wall, and under sunlight it looks completely different to artificial light in the evening. So have a look at it under different lights as well. Consider adding a badge. So this is kind of a bit of a, everyone's a bit on two different minds about it, and it really depends on your audience, and you really should be in touch with your audience and engaging their feedback. Some publishers add a badge to their book, whether it's on the front or whether it's on the spine, like Overscroft, because it can be tricky, especially in online retailers, to find the accessible format. So it just helps your customer find it more quickly. But then on the flip side, people don't want to be pointed out that they're reading that specific format and the stigma attached to that. So, you know, utilize kind of social media. If you've got a good social media presence, see what your audience thinks. You know, mail outs as well, get feedback. There isn't no right or wrong answer. It's pretty much split down the middle as to whether publishers do it or don't do it. Ooh. And I've actually just put a couple of covers that I've borrowed from the internet, just to show some books that do have badges on them. One is large print, and one is a dyslexia friendly edition. As I say, everyone does it differently. I think most important is just making your customer aware of the edition type it is, which brings me quite nicely on to the metadata. So consider adding into your long and your short description what the format is. Quite often retailers will kind of hide the accessible format with the standard text edition. So if you've got it in the description, i.e. you put in the description it's an easy reads book, your customers are like, this is the format I want to buy. So, and also specifically for large print and dyslexia as well, putting the font you've used, more so for large print, the point of the font size that you've used. Also, if you've used a different colour, so some publishers for dyslexia friendly books will use a different font colour on a cream or a white paper. So just give them as much information as possible. It just ensures a better sale and minimises your risk of returns. Also better for the retailers as well. It minimises the risk of them buying an edition in error. If applicable, use the edition code, which I know Dan just mentioned. Not all accessible formats have edition codes, but I have used an example. So large print within an Onyx feed has an edition code of LTE, and most major retailers are very good at categorizing with the edition type or code as long as it is used. Really important is that you use a new ISBN for each format. Regardless of what the format is, it does require a new ISBN. So just a few things to call out overall. All formats should be published at the same time. So we get a lot of feedback at UCAF, and I know my friends at RNIB also get a lot of feedback as well from readers to say, you know, they wanted to read the latest book, but it's not available in the accessible format, or the accessible format is coming out 6 months after the standard text paperback and hardbacks. And if they're not people that want to use an e-reader or an audio book, they actually want the physical format, it kind of excludes them from everything that's going on. So it's really important with all of your formats that they're publishing at the same time, and if they're available for pre-order, your accessible format should be on for pre-order exactly the same as your other edition types. Obviously check out UCAF, and we've got some great stuff on our website. We're actually working at the moment on large print guidelines internationally, so we're working with associations all over the world and some publishers, so that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. So we've got CNIB in Canada, the American Print House, Roundtable in Australia, Publishers Accessibility Action Group, a couple of publishers on there, Taylor and Francis and Bloomsbury, Overscroft are on there, so that whichever association you go to in the world, they're telling you the same format advice for large print. So we do some great stuff. I'm always happy to help. And I also just mentioned the Publishers Accessibility Action Group. Also great for guidance. Some of you might come across them during the run up to EAA. You can also sign their charter to support accessible publishing, which is a great thing to do as well. So a little plug here, but the books can be sold wholesale. Accessible formats can be sold wholesale via our partnership with Gardeners or any wholesale platform. really important that these accessible formats are readily available as the same as any other format. So that someone can go on any named website, I'm not going to name one, but can click on and get the book that they want to get. And accessible print formats open up a whole new customer base and revenue stream. So we've heard a couple of stats during the call, and I just took note of some just to give you an idea of your potential customer base that you're possibly missing out on. So for dyslexia, the British government says 10% of the UK population is dyslexic, which equates at the moment to about 6 million people. We haven't spoke about it in this webinar, but easy reads, which are great for people learning English as a second language. So they typically have kind of like shorter sentences, shorter books, accompanying images. Easy reads, the British Council says that 1.5 billion people currently learning English. For large print, the World Health Organization says 2.2 billion globally have near or distant visual impairment. And that's not even covering everything we've spoken about today. So it's a huge pool of people. So it's creating that social inclusion, but it's also an additional revenue stream for you. And if you don't have someone in-house that can create these formats for you, there are lots of tools available online. So I'm more than happy to, if you want to reach out, I can recommend some tools and some platforms that you are able to use. Also want to just quickly call out RNIB. So something that I highly recommend if you're dipping your toe into accessible formats is getting some user feedback on your finished book. So RNIB offer a service whereby they'll have users with different visual impairments. Are great if you're doing large print, and the users will give feedback on your paper, on the text you've used, on the font, and all that kind of stuff. You know, perhaps on social media, call for anyone that reads accessible formats to give you feedback. Maybe they get a gift card or something, I don't know. But it goes a long way. So that's me. Any questions, whether it be print or whether it be UCAF, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, or I'm happy for Karina to share my email after the webinar. Thanks, Karina.
Great. Thanks, Laura. Yes, again, some really interesting observations here. I think that the mention of the thing we haven't, well, you've mentioned it, but the thing I think we need to talk about as well is the massive market there is for accessible printed books, because we're talking about printed books here. Obviously there's digital as well, but this webinar is focused on printed books. So that additional revenue stream from the stats that you've given and that the other speakers have given as well, we can't deny that, and I think that's worth paying attention to. I think as well, what keeps coming through and what we've heard in other BIC webinars on accessibility, or the other ones have been all on digital, but the same message is coming through about simultaneous publication and simultaneous availability, whether that's to you know, available for pre-order or available for ordering when they want, when people want to order it, is that it has to be the same. All the formats have to be the same. Otherwise, we're not allowing for inclusion. And you know, of course, everybody wants to read with their friends, with their colleagues, with their family, with their children, etc., etc. And you know, people want to, you know, there are trends, aren't there? Certain books come out at a certain time, you hear about it all over social media, and your friends are all talking about it. So if you can't get involved and you can't read it, you're being left out. So yeah, so that's coming through very clearly. So thank you for that. We will now go to the Q&A. So I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully you can see my screen. Q&A time. So I'm going to have a look and see if we've got any questions in the question box. Bear with me while I pull this out. Oh. So first one we have is here we go. Right, talk amongst yourselves. Here we go. Technology, hey, love it. So we have got a few here. So I'm curious to know what, if any, technology is available to enable the quick creation of accessible books. Are digitally printed books a viable option for the shorter runs that may be needed? So who would like to take that first? So tackle the first bit, I think, about the technology. Sorry, Laura.
There's two that I know of, and I can't remember the name of one of them, but I have it written down on my computer. One of them that I do remember is called Vellum, and you essentially pay per year. Yeah, and it creates, it's not very much. I'm sure one of them's only about £100 or £200 a year, and you can create unlimited formats, and that's standard text, paperback, hardback, large print, ebook. I don't know if it does any other formats as well.
Okay.
So there are a couple of platforms which I can share with you, Karina, to share with everyone.
Yeah, that would be really helpful actually, and then our attendees can do their own research and work out if that's suitable for them, and if it is, which option might meet their needs. Okay, I'm just seeing if there's any more. There's a few more, but I just wanted, looking at the time, I did want to ask the question, a sort of a back to basics question really, is if that you're a publisher now that isn't doing printed books made accessible. So you're starting from scratch. So all the advice we've heard today is fantastic, but I'm conscious it might feel a bit overwhelming of where to start. So that's my question. Where to start? I mean, where have you gone for advice? How do you identify what the needs of the different types of requirements are? How do you go to how do you find that sort of trusted advice, and how do you sort of collect all that information and make sense of it, and then sort of roll that out within your organization? So if we can put ourselves in the mind of a publisher who's not done this before, what would your advice be?
I think to answer it, I think it depends on what the publisher wants. So what kind of format are they wanting to publish? What kind of book are they wanting to publish? How are they wanting to make it accessible? I think in relation to what I was talking about with symbols, if anyone was interested in creating symbolized books, like as we've learned, there's a huge market for accessible reading. We do offer, it's kind of answering your previous question as well, is we offer to symbolize books for publishers. So we would provide that service, because symbol reading and the symbol set would need to be checked and verified by speech and language therapists and the SEN community themselves. So there's that element of it. But starting from scratch, I think the main thing that I've learned is, in order to make accessible reading for people who are reluctant readers or struggle to read, is to speak to the people themselves and make sure they're involved in the journey. So go to SEN schools, speak to people at charities, really widen your understanding of what SEN and reluctant readers need in order to provide a product that best suits them.
Yeah. So I was going to say, I mean, just you need to identify who you're trying to reach, and then test everything rigorously with, anything that you think is an intervention. It's not going to work for everybody. Dyslexia is a massive spectrum and it can affect people in many different ways. So you're never going to be able to produce something that suits everybody. But what the Barrington Stoke did at the start was go out with the interventions and test them with the children that they wanted to reach to find what worked, and then what worked for the largest cohort within, you know, that group. So testing and testing, but we'd be really clear about who you want to reach, but speak to them. As Emma says, it's, you know, you can't make any assumptions. You know, you have to go directly to the people that you want to reach.
Yeah, I think that's true. Dan, did you want to say anything extra, or? Oh, I think you're on mute, Dan.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, that's classic COVID presenting there. But yeah, it's just ensuring that, yes, when you've made a plan and you've decided these are the people that we're trying to reach, making sure that they can get access to it, and there is and once it's been tested, making sure it can get out there to the people that need it. And I think just checking everything. You can't check enough. You have to just keep researching and keep building on it. It's not good. Unfortunately, nothing will be perfect, but you have to just keep working on it and working with the right people and seeking out the experts to sort of build on to keep building the publishing project.
Yeah, thank you. Laura, did you want to add anything, or you think we've covered? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So going back to our attendees, see what we've got. Oh, somebody's put something. Not really a question, but it's very interesting to hear that publishers are presenting the same story or content in different ways for different reading ages and abilities. So that's some positive feedback there. Sorry, just reading. I'm looking over here as well because I have another screen, so just in case you all wonder. So I have a question here. I'm just scanning it. Oh, that's nice. Thank you all for the talk. I wanted to know, if you don't mind, what printing techniques are used for these books? Do you use POD or short runs or something else? Thank you. Who wants to take that?
I can speak from printers' perspective
Cool.
in terms of what we see. So we see, so at CPI we do POD, we do short run, we do traditional litho offset printing, and we see accessible formats across all three print processes. So I think it again comes to what type of book you're publishing, what size publisher you are. You would make the same considerations as you would, I guess, with a standard textbook. But certainly we see it across all three processes.
Okay. Does anyone have anything else to add? Elsa, you look like you might be about to say something.
Pretty standard printing process. We print some of our books with CPI with Laura, just in, but we print just with standard printers. We don't. Our print lands are large enough, you know, we don't need to do print on demand, you know, so it's standard printing process.
And I guess it depends on your own
market
considerations, that so your own market, your own needs, your own sort of, you know, costs and budgets and everything else. Okay. I wanted to go back to, sorry, sort of leaping ahead and leaping around, wanted to go back to Dan and ask you a question about the consideration of weight for large print. So for those that aren't familiar, what are the weight considerations and how do you go about them? What's involved? I guess you would have to do multiple volumes for particularly heavy titles, but again, I don't want to assume, so over to you.
Yeah, oh yeah, I fixed it. Got it right this time. So we it's not a, this is to, we don't have a set, this is maximum, this is minimum, but it's more the when we're looking at looking at a book and looking what will it be size wise in large print, it's thinking about the whole user experience and so we're sort of thinking, well, if this number of pages, it's also a thickness as well as a weight. Is it too much really for them to hold? But the paper that we use is lightweight, so it's not too heavy, but it will but yeah, we don't do a maximum. But on the volumes, we have in the past, in the 80s and 70s, we did War and Peace, which I think was in split across 12 volumes,
Wow.
but we don't split titles because of our customer base being primarily libraries. It's not a great reader experience if they've read volume 1 of a title and then can't access volume 2 straight after. So in that regard, we sort of, if we would have to split it by volume, we would maybe look to maybe not do it in large print because there could be issues further on. But then then we would look at, oh, it's it may be a larger page count, but we think, oh, it's suitable enough that the market will want it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. If that's sorry.
Perfect. Yeah, no, thank you. But are there weight limits, and what goes into the consideration of those weight limits? Is it?
So it's there isn't weight limits, but for us internally, there is there is maybe a page count limit because of the weight, because of the thickness of the book. But yeah, that's it's a case by case basis. If it's a particularly big author that the market requires it, then and the readers we believe would require it, then yeah, we would look into it.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to talk a little bit as well about discoverability and Onyx and metadata. It's that balance, isn't it, between the discoverability and not stigmatizing. But do you feel that publishers are aware of even all the possible metadata elements in the Onyx feed that can be used to describe, denote, share accessibility features, not just in digital but also in the printed book? And do you think there's an awareness piece needed there, or do you think publishers are generally already aware? And then with retailers, do you think there's enough display of what those accessibility features are? So this is about the journey through the supply chain of that accessibility data. Just wondered what your thoughts were, just in a neutral way, of course, what those might be. And do you think there's anything maybe BIC could do to help raise awareness of that, if perhaps it's not being as utilised as much as possible? Just interested to hear your thoughts, really.
I think from an Every Cherry point of view, if we think about retailers and people who stock the Every Cherry books, I don't know if Elsa's had a similar experience with Barrington Stoke titles, but often we get questions of where should I put them on the shelves, because obviously you have the reading level, but then you have the reading interest. Should they be separate so that people know exactly where to go? Should they be added in and included into the other shelves so that there's no sense of not being inclusive? And it's a really difficult it's really difficult because for some people with a disability, knowing exactly where to go in a shop and finding the right book for them is really key. But at the same time, if you separate the books, it's also adding to that idea of, well, I need something different. So it's a really difficult question to answer. I think signposting is key. Subtle signposting is probably the best answer. That's my answer for retailers, but metadata wise, I don't know if anyone else might be better to answer, as it's again not my area of expertise.
Anybody want to take that?
I think my key advice on that would be, especially if you've already got an accessible format, is just trial on a couple of titles, adding in the long and short descriptions, as I mentioned, that correct edition codes if one exists for your format, and then measure the sales over a 3-month period versus the previous 3 months without the information. And don't just measure sales, measure your return rate as well, and what that looks like once you've added that information in, and I think that will give you a very good idea of what you should be doing.
Yeah, and I think as well, maybe have a chat with your customer, not your end readers, but your trading customers, and say, you know, are you using these metadata elements in the Onyx feed? Do you use them? Do you receive them? Do you share them on your web pages, etc.? So, or do you use them in some way to inform the descriptions on your web page? So I think those conversations would be really helpful. So then you only need to enter the data once, in theory, and it's in a clearly constructed vocabulary. We are out of time. We are over. Just for those of you that are able to stay, and hopefully our speakers, you can all still stay just for maybe 2 minutes. Just had one question, well, two actually, but the first one hopefully is a quick one. Is the Barrington Stoke paper colour a printed tint or literally different coloured stock?
It's different with different paper, but different printers, but we have different coloured stock, and sometimes it's printed with a Pantone onto the paper, so it depends on.
Okay. Yeah, brilliant. That was nice and easy. And last one, I am going over time, so apologies for those of you that have to leave, but in a world increasingly using AI, can artificial intelligence play a part in reading content and outputting a format specific to different readers' needs? I feel a whole other webinar coming on. Who wants to give just a quick response, quick initial thought to that?
I think maybe it comes down to what Elsa was saying about quality.
Yeah.
And grasping that reader and making the formats accessible. So for symbol reading, for example, I would say it's much better to do it in-house properly and make sure that it's consistent so that it doesn't end up confusing readers.
Yeah.
My answer would be go down the quality route, because you may alienate your readers and make things more confusing if you don't. Sorry if that's not the answer anyone was looking for.
No, it's just an opinion, isn't it? So so thank you for that. And who knows, maybe in 10, 20 years time, AI may have developed at such a pace that certain extra things that we can't think of today are possible, but we can only answer for where we are today. Did anybody else want to comment on the AI question?
No.
Okay. Great. All right. We're going to leave it there. So thank you, everybody. Well, thank you to our speakers, first of all. Let me just get my slide up so you can see some links. Bear with me. So thank you to everyone for attending today. Thank you to our speakers. So thank you to Elsa, Emma, Daniel and Laura for taking the time to prepare for today and rehearse and actually come and talk to you all today live. We'll make the presentation slides available at some point. So where are we? Thursday, so likely next week. And so watch out for those coming into your inbox. I think, Laura, you were going to share some links with me as well, so we can pass those on.
I popped them in the chat.
Oh, okay, great, thank you. We also, you'll get the recording of this event next week as well when we send out the slides. And then we will also post this in about a month's time to our website for everybody else. So, but you will obviously get, because you've attended today, you'll get first look at it. So yeah, so keep in touch. Thank you for attending. You can find out more about BIC and the work we do on our website. The link is on the screen there. And remember to take a look at our accessibility hub as well. So we'll put the recording of this in there eventually, and the links that Laura's sharing as well. They'll be useful to go in there. And you can keep up to date with everything we're doing by joining our mailing list. If you go onto our website, you'll be able to find a link for the mailing list on there. And Yeah, just remains for me to say thank you again, and we hope to see you at a BIC event in the near future. So I hope you found today's session informative and helpful, and I look forward to seeing you at an event in the future. Take care until then. Bye.
Bye.